Welcome to Talks of Life, where we get to explore the lives and perspectives of really fascinating people.
People who've truly seen it all, you know?
Yeah, those who have seen it all.
Yeah.
And today we're diving into the world of Balys Sruoga, a Lithuanian writer, known for his incredible resilience, sharp wit,
Yeah.
and his really powerful memoir, The Forest of the Gods.
A powerful memoir.
And you might not expect humor
Right.
to be a defining trait of someone who lived through a Nazi concentration camp,
Yeah.
but
You wouldn't.
that's what makes Sruoga so fascinating.
That's precisely it. And what's so captivating about Sruoga is that he was known as a humorist even before the war.
Wow.
So imagine carrying that sense of humor into the abyss of Stutthof,
Oh my God.
one of the most brutal camps in the Nazi system.
Yeah.
His memoir, written shortly after his liberation in 1945, becomes this incredible blend of dark humor and just unflinching honesty,
Yeah.
offering a glimpse into a world most of us can only imagine.
Mind-boggling, isn't it? To face such dehumanizing conditions and still find a way to laugh, to satirize the absurdity of it all.
To cope.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me was Sruoga's focus on the Latvian community within Stutthof. He dedicates quite a bit of his memoir to describing their presence, their culture,
Their struggles?
their experience.
I have to admit, I wasn't expecting that.
Right.
Did you find that surprising?
It's definitely an aspect of the book that jumps out at you.
It does.
And it's even more complex when you consider the historical context.
Right.
Remember, Latvia, like Lithuania, had been occupied by the Soviets, then fell under Nazi control. So within the camp system, many Latvians were coerced into joining the SS,
Wow.
creating this incredibly tense dynamic between different groups of prisoners.
That's where it gets really chilling.
Yeah.
Sruoga describes the arrival of these Latvian SS prisoners and the mixed reactions they evoke. Some prisoners felt betrayed, while others understood the impossible choices these men faced.
He writes, "The arrival of the Latvian SS men cast a long shadow over the camp. Their presence was a constant reminder of the power. The Nazis held the power to turn brother against brother."
Wow.
Can you imagine the weight of that situation?
Oh.
The moral dilemmas, the feeling of being trapped between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. And this is where Sruoga's perspective on control comes into play.
Okay.
He seems to suggest that even in the most oppressive, dehumanizing environments,
Yeah.
there's a sliver of agency, a choice in how you respond. He doesn't shy away from portraying the darkness of the collaborators, but he also highlights the ways in which people resisted, clung to their identity,
Right.
found ways to maintain their humanity.
And that's where his humor comes in, right?
Exactly.
It's not about ignoring the horror, but rather about finding a way to process it, to cope with the absurdity of it all. He uses this dark, almost absurdist humor to expose the dehumanizing nature of the camp system.
Exactly. One example that comes to mind is his description of the camp's hierarchy. He compares the different prisoner groups to a bizarre theatrical production.
Wow.
With the capos. Those are the prisoner functionaries, as actors, playing their roles with exaggerated zeal.
Oh my God.
It's such a striking image, highlighting the absurdity of their position within this twisted power structure.
It's almost like he's saying, look, even in this hellhole, there's still room for irony, for satire,
Yeah.
for pointing out the sheer ridiculousness of what's happening.
Exactly.
And this dark comedic lens also colors his portrayal of the Latvians.
Yes.
He describes their national pride, their strong community bonds, their love of singing, even to the point of annoying other prisoners.
Oh, really?
He does.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he even observes their perceived eagerness to please the camp authorities,
Right.
which, as you can imagine, caused friction with other prisoners who saw it as a form of collaboration.
Yeah.
He describes the Latvians navigating the treacherous currents of the camp with a strange ease, but notes that, to some, this was a source of resentment.
He describes it almost like a performance. This careful dance they had to do to survive.
Yeah.
And in one passage, he talks about their singing, saying, "Their voices would rise above the din of the camp, the haunting melodies of their folk songs filling the air. It was a reminder of their homeland, of a life beyond the barbed wire.
Wow.
But to some, it was also a grating reminder of their presence, their otherness."
It's fascinating because their singing becomes a symbol of both resilience and a source of tension,
Right.
highlighting the complexities of their situation.
Yeah.
But it's crucial to remember that The Forest of the Gods was written under the watchful eye of the Soviet regime.
Oh, right.
Sruoga's work was heavily edited and censored.
Wow.
Passages critical of certain national groups or those that could be interpreted as drawing parallels to Soviet labor camps
Yeah.
were often removed.
So how do we grapple with that, knowing that we might only have a partial view of Sruoga's true intentions, his unfiltered observations?
It's a challenge, but it's also an invitation to think critically. We have to consider the context, the pressures he faced, and acknowledge that there are likely layers of meaning embedded within his writing that we might never fully uncover.
And that brings us to one particular story that stood out to me.
Okay.
The funeral of Konstantinas Augst.
Oh, wow.
Now, Augsti was a prominent Latvian political figure,
Okay.
and Sruoga describes his funeral in the camp with a strange reverence, almost a sense of awe.
Interesting.
Why do you think that is?
It's a powerful moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you consider who Augst was.
Right.
He was the first chairman of the Latvian Central Council, a group formed to resist both Nazi and Soviet occupation.
Wow.
His funeral, even in the bleakest of circumstances,
Right.
becomes this symbol of defiance, a reminder that even within a concentration camp, there were undercurrents of political resistance happening.
And here's how Sruoga describes it. They carried his body on a makeshift stretcher, a tattered sheet serving as his shroud. But their heads were held high, their voices strong as they sang their mournful hymns. It was a defiant act, a refusal to be broken.
Gives me chills.
It gives me chills just thinking about it.
Yeah.
To hold on to that sense of dignity, of resistance, in the face of such unimaginable suffering.
It speaks volumes about the power of hope, of identity, of refusing to be completely crushed by the system.
And it makes you wonder what other acts of resistance, large and small, went unrecorded,
Right.
lost to history.
That's a haunting thought.
It is. It makes you realize how much we don't know.
Yeah.
How many stories are still waiting to be told?
And it raises an important question. How much control do we really have in the face of overwhelming forces? Do we simply succumb, or do we find ways to resist, to hold on to those things that define us?
That's a question that resonates throughout the Forest of the Gods.
Yeah.
And one we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into Sruoga's world.
Welcome back to Talks of Life. We're continuing our exploration of Balys Sruoga and his remarkable memoir, The Forest of the Gods.
In the last part, we talked about how Sruoga's sharp wit and dark humor helped him navigate the horrors of Studov.
Absolutely.
And we delved into his intriguing portrayal of the Latvian community within the camp.
Yes.
And we left off on this powerful image of Konstantinas Augsti's funeral, a symbol of resistance in the face of unimaginable suffering.
Right.
It made me think about how, even in the darkest of places, people find ways to hold on to hope, to their identity, to those things that give them strength.
It's a testament to the human spirit, isn't it?
It is.
The fact that Sruoga chose to include this event, despite the risks of writing under Soviet censorship, tells us something about its significance. It wasn't just a mourning of a man, it was a symbolic act of defiance against those who sought to erase their identity.
It's a reminder that history is made up of individual stories, individual acts of courage and despair.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about Sruoga's portrayal of the Latvians, it's clear he doesn't shy away from their complexities. He describes their national pride, their strong community bonds, their love of singing, but he also highlights their perceived eagerness to please the camp authorities.
And that's a point of contention for some readers.
Right.
Some have criticized Sruoga for being biased against Latvians, for painting them as collaborators.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that Sruoga was writing from his own perspective, from his own experiences within the camp.
And let's not forget the contest of censorship.
Right.
We know that certain passages, especially those critical of national groups, or those that could be interpreted as alluding to Soviet labor camps, were removed from the book.
Exactly.
So we're only seeing a fragment of Sruoga's complete thoughts.
Exactly. And this raises the question of how we should approach a text that's been shaped by censorship.
Right.
Do we take it at face value, or do we read between the lines, trying to discern the author's true intentions?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
It is.
We have to consider the historical context, the political pressures Sruoga faced, and acknowledge that we might never have the full picture.
And it's precisely this challenge that makes studying historical texts so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just about passively absorbing information. It's
Right.
about actively engaging with it, questioning it, interpreting it.
There's a passage where Sruoga describes the tension between the Latvians and other prisoners. He writes, "The Latvians, with their diligence and their songs, seem to navigate the camp's treacherous currents with a strange ease. But this to some was a source of resentment. It set them apart, made them seem complicit in the camp's brutal system."
It's a nuanced observation that highlights the different ways people coped with the horrors of the camp.
And it brings us back to Sruoga's view on attitude and control.
Yes.
He seems to suggest that even in the most dehumanizing situations, we retain a certain agency, a capacity to choose how we respond.
Absolutely.
He's not saying that people had control over the events that were happening to them, right?
Right.
But he's highlighting the importance of maintaining your inner strength, your sense of self, even when everything around you is designed to break you.
Exactly. And this is evident not just in his portrayal of Latvians, but also in his own use of humor.
Right.
He finds ways to laugh, to satirize, to point out the absurdity of the situation. And in doing so, he reclaims a sliver of control.
It's like he's saying, yes, this is happening. It's horrible. It's unjust. But I'm not going to let it completely define me. I'm going to find ways to resist, to maintain my sense of self, even if it's just through humor.
And that's a powerful message, isn't it?
It is.
That even in the face of unimaginable suffering, we have a choice in how we respond. We can choose to be consumed by the darkness, or we can choose to find those glimmers of light, those moments of humor, of hope, of defiance.
And those choices, those acts of resistance, however small they might seem, are what ultimately define us.
Absolutely.
They're what allow us to maintain our humanity in the face of inhumanity.
And it makes you think about how we approach challenges in our own lives, doesn't it?
It does.
Do we let them overwhelm us?
Yeah.
Or do we find ways to navigate them, to retain our sense of self, to even find humor in the midst of adversity?
It's a question that Sruoga's work continues to pose long after we finish reading it.
It is.
It's a question that forces us to confront the complexities of human nature, the choices we make, and the things we hold on to when everything else is stripped away.
And as we move into the final part of our exploration of Balys, Sruoga, and the Forest of the Gods,
Okay.
I want you to keep this question in mind.
Okay.
How can we apply Sruoga's insights about attitude and control to our own lives? How can we find those sparks of resilience, of humor, of hope in the face of our own personal challenges?
Join us for part 3, where we'll delve deeper into Sruoga's legacy and the ongoing discussions surrounding his work. Welcome back to Talks of Life. We've been unpacking the world of Balys Sruoga and his extraordinary memoir, The Forest of the Gods, a work that's both haunting and darkly humorous. We've talked about censorship, the Latvian presence in Stutthof, and this intriguing idea of finding agency and even humor in the face of unimaginable suffering.
And as we wrap up our exploration, I think it's essential to consider the impact of The Forest of the Gods.
Okay.
It's a book that continues to spark discussion, debate, and even controversy, particularly within the Latvian community.
You're right. Sruoga's portrayal of the Latvians, specifically his observations about their perceived willingness to collaborate with the Nazi regime, has generated a lot of strong reactions over the years.
It's understandable.
It is.
Any work dealing with such sensitive historical events, especially one that delves into the complexities of collaboration and resistance, is bound to evoke a spectrum of responses.
Some Latvian readers have praised Sruoga for his unflinching honesty, for capturing the nuances of their situation within the camp system. Others, however, have criticized his observations as being biased or incomplete.
And I think this tension speaks to the challenges of interpreting history, especially when it comes to issues as sensitive as collaboration during wartime.
Right.
It's easy to judge the past through the lens of the present.
It is.
But we have to remember that those who lived through those times faced impossible choices, moral dilemmas that we can only begin to comprehend.
It's a reminder that history isn't black and white.
No.
There are shades of gray complexities that defy easy categorization.
Absolutely.
And I think Sruoga's work forces us to confront that ambiguity.
Yes.
To grapple with the uncomfortable truths of human nature.
Absolutely. He doesn't shy away from portraying the collaborators, the opportunists, but he also highlights the resilience, the defiance, the small acts of kindness that persisted even in the darkest of places.
And this complexity is reflected in his overall view on attitude and control. He seems to be saying that while we might not be able to control the events that happen to us.
Right.
We can choose how we respond, how we maintain our dignity, our sense of self.
He highlights this through his own use of humor.
Right.
His ability to find irony and absurdity even in the midst of unimaginable suffering.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful message for all of us, regardless of our circumstances.
It's a reminder that even when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, we retain a certain agency, a capacity to choose how we react, how we maintain our humanity.
And that choice, that attitude, can be a powerful form of resistance in itself.
It's about finding those glimmers of hope, those moments of laughter, those acts of defiance that remind us of our shared humanity, even in the most dehumanizing of environments.
And as we conclude our exploration of Balys Sruoga and the Forest of the Gods, I hope you'll take this message with you. Look for those moments of resilience.
Yes.
Those sparks of humor, those acts of defiance, both in the stories of others and in your own life.
Because it's in those moments that we truly see the enduring power of the human spirit. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Talks of Life.